Alright everyone, at this point the internet is under attack primarily by the rest of the developed world, specifically the European Union. I find it amusing that the First Amendment here, people's right to speak here on internet platforms based in the United States, is primarily under threat not from some tin-horn dictator, not from some group that's like theocratic in the deep third world. It's under threat mainly from other very developed, very advanced cultures in Western Europe that simply have a lot of hate speech laws. Hate speech being, of course, a useless term that means absolutely nothing. It's totally malleable. A culture could decide that anything constitutes hate speech if it wanted to. Therefore, I think it should be completely scrapped for legal reasons. It shouldn't be anywhere in the lexicon of legality. I think at this point, though, the internet is so intrinsic to the economies of the Western world. It's so important as a communications tool. It goes way past just private individuals communicating. By the way, at this point, it's used for sending out alerts for emergency situations, for check-ins during attacks, certainly to coordinate in the event of natural disasters. It is so absolutely important and intrinsic, and I would say central, to the way in which the Western world now functions, that we should consider here in the United States protecting the internet, protecting the freedom there, the freedom to innovate, to think clearly, to have dialogue and discussion and debate with a constitutional amendment. Now, the form of this amendment would be very clear, and it's based on the first, because the internet is explicitly protected. Internet speech in the United States is protected by the First Amendment. The right to the freedom of the press extends beyond the corporate media. Anyone creating a blog or a vlog, they would have the same protections. They also have to abide by the same rudimentary responsibilities in the case of things like slander. I'll get into that a little more. A person who's speaking on the internet, as I do, is explicitly protected under the concept of free speech. But we need to make it more explicit, because it's quite clear right now that the main goal of some of the other nations that find free speech here to be a bad thing, because the internet, of course, is a global force. They don't want foreigners being able to freely weigh in on their politics, their culture, and so forth. They're attempting to intimidate tech firms into censoring. So the form is very simple. Any company doing such communications work, this would extend to ISPs and sites that allow users to communicate with one another in any sort of medium, would be required to abide by certain terms if they wish to operate within the United States in order to protect their essentially public function. As opposed to having what was suggested by the Democrats, which is net neutrality. You don't need that. You simply need a constitutional amendment protecting that de facto purpose without allowing any actual government strangulation of the internet. You would have simply existing government functions would oversee the protection of users within the United States from any form of foreign censorship. Because not being censored by the U.S. government, generally speaking, the U.S. government takes a hands-off approach because of the legal difficulty with actually attempting to tamp down on free speech. If you're being censored, by the way, on some social media site, chances are it's not the U.S. government trying to censor you, it's Europe. It's coming from the UK or France or Germany or something like that, where they have very draconian laws. They don't have a free speech sort of thing over there. They have the concept of highly regulated speech, which is agreed upon to be agreeable to the society that happens to be in sway at the time. They've never progressed past that somewhat Victorian view, I think, of expression. The idea that there are certain types of speech that should be absolutely banned and you should be punished for using them, regardless of what form you're using them in. Now, there would be 4 specific listings for kinds of material that could be censored in some way. And this would apply to the publishing world. It also applies to speaking on the corner. There are certain things that you cannot say or express because they are other forms of criminality that completely do away with the concept of free expression. One would be slander. Just because you have the right to speak doesn't mean you have the right to attempt to damage somebody else's potential commercial credibility by spreading untruths about them that you know to be untrue. You're doing it for a very specific, often commercial purpose. Within industries, this is even more intrinsic and important. Let's say Joe owns an auto garage. There's another auto garage at the other end of town. Joe takes to the internet to make a bunch of blog posts and videos about how his competitor at the other end of town is shitty, and he's committing incest, and he abuses animals, and all sorts of other terrible things about him. He's criminally liable because he's spreading those rumors for a commercial purpose. He's doing it to try to denigrate the reputation of one of his direct competitors. It's even worse than if it were just some random person he had a stick to pick with that he was targeting with those same claims, although that too would open him up to civil action. So that would be number one. Number two would be criminal harassment. Now this is differentiated from trolling. If I go on the internet and I say to someone, haha, loser, you know, you're a piece of crap, that's not criminal harassment. That's just trolling or cyberbullying, another mostly nonsensical term. But if I persist in doing that, if I'm told to stop, blocked by that person, and I make a dozen sock accounts and I keep doing the same thing, that could be considered a form of criminal harassment. It's how far you go. It's not really what you say in that context. It's not necessarily slanderous. It's not necessarily a credible threat of violence, which would be part 3 here. It's not necessarily those, but it's pervasive enough so that you're potentially taking a toll on that person's liberty in their own life to function in the way they wish to function. They have the right to be left alone by people who are going to persist in attempting to harass them. So that would be 2. Number 3 would be credible threat of harm or other criminal action, for instance. And it has to be credible. If you go online and say, I am going to mount a death ray on the moon and fry your house, that's not a credible threat. It's out there, it might rankle somebody, it might be seen as evidence that you're a lunatic, or just trolling most of the time, but it's not credible. You're not actually going to do that. But saying, I'm going to fill up a bunch of Molotov cocktails, come to your house, burn it down, and beat you while you watch your own house burn into nothing more than charred remains, could be construed as a credible threat. And people have to use their common sense in determining if you're going to sort of dick around and do the bully language sort of stuff. You have to be able to differentiate what would be legally considered a more credible threat than others. Saying, oh, well, I fucking hate you, I wish I could beat you around the head is not a threat at all. That's just saying that's your opinion. It's a violent opinion, but you're not actually threatening that person. But if you were to go up to that person and say, I am going to beat you around the head, I hate you so much I'm going to do harm to you, or harm your family, harm your property or something, that would certainly be illegal to do. And the 4th is copyright, and I say this with the one reservation that our copyright laws are all screwed up. Fair use is sometimes classed as not fair use in an arbitrary manner. The copyright lengths are inordinately long with regards to texts and to music especially, number 2. There are other problems with the FCC involved with like televised programming and captions and things like that, number 3. And it overlaps loosely with the internet enough, number 4, to be a problem. That being said, you can't have a no copyright situation. If a person has created some sort of work, they have the right to profit off of it exclusive of all others for a sane period of time. Is the 100 and something years for music really sane? I don't think so. It should probably be 50 years or something. There should be songs from the early rock period that are already dropping out of copyright, because generally speaking, the people who made that music are already dead. And their families, if they want to issue a re-edition, some sort of remastered material or demos or something like that to profit off of their family member or their co-worker, maybe they were left rights to something by them or a company, then that's all well and good, but the original material, how long are you going to keep it in copyright? The government has continuously moved the goalposts on this topic with regards to music and in a few cases to literature, although they've backed off of that some, to the point at which you have works from before the Victorian era that are still technically under a copyright. I consider that to be retarded. Then there are spurious copyright claims, I would say, paired with this. If that's going to be there at all, there should also be a little addendum that specifically makes it a criminal action for any firm to employ such software or firms as may create false legal claims to copyright. For instance, a long time ago I uploaded a song. I can't remember what song it was. I was given permission to upload it. and it contained a clip from an interview of Charles Manson. And all of a sudden it got a copyright claim. This is, I think, 5 years ago or something. It got a claim from the television owners of the actual interview, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because it was just a clip used in that original work. It has nothing to do with the original broadcast. Likewise, you get situations where some musical group, some musical artist, the firms that they're employing will generate a claim on something, like they've sampled something from a movie and you've got the movie clip up and they're still claiming it or something like that. It's two totally different mediums. The fact that there's a 1/100th of 1% overlap between the audio there doesn't mean they have a legal claim. They can't retroactively claim the original material that they themselves sampled. They're digging into somebody else's copyright claim. And the network that airs it doesn't have a problem with you having it up, and yet all of a sudden you've got to file a counter notice. You know, a potentially legal process can be lengthy, and it's kind of nonsensical. But these four categories of material could continue to be reasonably suppressed, because you can't just randomly slander other people, you can't threaten to harm them. But otherwise, if you're just saying things that are unpopular or edgy or objectionable, those should be explicitly protected, and those should be specifically enumerated as well. That those sorts of things, just because they're found unfashionable or potentially harmful in a psychological manner or fake, like fake news, doesn't mean they're not explicitly protected by the First Amendment. If we impose such a protection of the internet, we will reap major rewards in the future when we don't have to deal with European-style censorship attempting to intrude upon U.S. firms involving U.S. users. The onus should be on them. If they want to do business with U.S. internet firms and interact with U.S. citizens who have that freedom, they have to decide whether that is acceptable to them or whether to cut the cord and create their own intranet or block these sites. And the sites themselves at this point, I don't think, can be counted upon to hold with the First Amendment, hold with, in some cases, the Fourth Amendment, protect users here. We're the ones with more commercial muscle anyway. It doesn't make any sense for anyone to be siding with the Europeans. They're going to stymie the internet altogether. All of the energy will be drained out of it. Now, so far, some people, I will say this as an aside, it needs to be said, some people have the wrong idea. When the Europeans are talking about regulating material on the net, predominantly what they're talking about is greater ability to block that content from appearing for people who are connecting from Europe. And they don't want to touch the issue of trying to ban U.S. citizens. It's like they wouldn't be able to ban me, but they can keep Europeans from watching my material. I can still put it out there, but they can deprive the audience of that experience. I think U.S. firms should do more to stop that from happening and tell the European people, you know, why aren't you doing something about this? We've got people who are expressing opinions that are perfectly legal, that aren't in many cases even objectionable. They're being blocked by your government. You're being deprived of the full experience of what our platform has to offer. We don't think that's a good idea, and they should lean on the European governments to stop doing that, because it's harmful. The internet is the greatest force of communication. There is no other significant force of communication anymore anyway. Mail is basically dying. Cable TV's dying. Radio's basically dead except for listening to music, which, again, you can get online. Increasingly, that's going to eat into their profits. Almost like using the telegraph or something like that, handing out flyers. Not as effective as making a YouTube video. But we need to protect that explicitly, or we could see the slow denigration of the First Amendment. And that would be a bad thing for the whole world. The ability to speak out against problems is how you begin solving problems. When you can no longer speak out against what you perceive as problems, they can never actually be solved because nobody's having a discussion about how to do so. That's about all. Peace out.